Morning to all of you dear children. Welcome back to our next video session of class 7 English 2. In the previous session, you studied about Marie Curie. We were doing the chapter Marie Curie, A Radiant Life. We did half of the chapter. Now we'll be continuing with the further part of the chapter. But before we continue, let us just do a brief recapitulation of that chapter. What we studied in the previous class was Marie Curie was a physicist, she was a chemist. She had a little difficulty in seeking admission at Warsaw because she wanted to go for further studies. So as she and her sister planned out, they took admission at Sorbonne in Paris, and finally she got admission in the field of science. But as I told you earlier, she had a very difficult life over there. She could merely meet her expenses, but she was very much dedicated to go on with her studies. So she just concentrated on her studies and she was carrying on with that. Then she met Pierre, who also was a scientist. He was a Frenchman, and they both got married. They were leading a very simple and a happy life. Both had a similar pattern of studying, similar field of studying. They did not have much furniture, did not have much money, but they were having a happy life. Now, seeing her dedication, Pierre left her his own research and he also joined Marie in her research work. Pierre and Marie, they both had made a laboratory in their storeroom. They both worked day and night, they worked very hard, and finally their hard work proved fruitful because they discovered two radioactive elements and they named them as polonium and radium. So this was what we had studied in the previous class. Now let us continue with the chapter. I'll follow the same pattern. I'll be showing you a paragraph. I will be reading that. Simultaneously, you can just have a look on the screen. After reading the paragraph, I will explain you the difficult words of that particular paragraph and I'll give a brief explanation of that particular part. So let us continue with that.
Dressed in her old dust-covered and acid-stained smock, her hair blown by the wind, surrounded by bitter smoke from her experiments, which stung her eyes and throat, Marie was a virtual factory all by herself. These were some of the happiest years of her life. Money for research was not easy to come by, and the Curies continued to teach to supplement their income. Torn between their own work and their jobs, they often forgot to eat and sleep. Thus, radioactivity grew and developed, meanwhile exhausting little by little the pair of physicists who had given it life.
As we read the chapter, let us understand the word meanings first. Now the first word meaning here is cross somebody's mind. The meaning of that is to come into your mind. The next word we come across is smock. Now what do you mean by smock? Here it's mentioned about smock. She was wearing a stained smock. Smock is basically a kind of a loose garment in which a person feels comfortable. Now here the meaning here is a loose comfortable piece of clothing like a long shirt. It was a long outfit. It is usually worn by women. Okay. The next word is supplement. Supplement, I'll explain you when I'm going to explain the paragraph. Now first understand the meaning. Supplement means to add something to make it complete. Something which is not complete, you add something to that and then it makes something as a complete whole. So let us proceed with the explanation of that paragraph. Now Marie was completely involved in the research work in her laboratory. Now what happened was she never concentrated towards her look, towards her beauty. She was balancing very well with the family work, with her daughters as well as with her research work. Her whole concentration was only towards her research work. So her dress was, because she carried out the experiments and the research work, her dress was always stained. Stained means she had that acid marks on her dress. It was a kind of a dirty kind of a dress, you can say. So it was completely stained. Then as and when she carried out the research work, because of the smoke, her hair were completely worn out. her eyes, her throat was also affected. Despite all these problems and all these struggles, she says that these were the happiest years of her life because she was actually involved in the work she was very much interested in. Now, you all are very well aware that to carry out the research is not an easy task. You need a huge amount of money. But Mary and Pierre were not that well-to-do to have to invest such a big amount in their research work. So that was a difficult task for them. So what they did is they tried to supplement that. Now here the meaning of supplement is because they were not having that much money. So to cover up those expenses, to bear those expenses, what they did is they both worked day and night. So actually they had to do double work. Now double work means they used to work also as well as they used to carry out the research work also. Now doing both the things, they started getting exhausted little by little, slowly and slowly. Though the research work, which was a development to science, was definitely going up, but their health was deteriorating slowly and slowly.
Finally, they achieved the miraculous outcome of their effort of purifying radium. Radium could become the ally of human beings in the war against cancer. Radium was useful, magnificently useful. A radium industry was about to be born. Pierre explained these things to his wife one Sunday morning. "We have two choices," Pierre told her. "We can describe the results of our research without reserve, including the process of purification, or else we can consider ourselves to be the proprietors, the inventors of radium, patent the technique and manufacture radium throughout the world." Mary reflected for a few seconds. Then she said, "It is impossible. It would be contrary to scientific spirit." Pierre's serious face lightened.
As we proceed further with the next paragraph, first of all, we'll go with the big meanings. Now, the first word that we come across here is miraculous. Miraculous means remarkable. Patent. Now, you must have come across this word very often. Let me explain you. First, let us read it out. An official right to be the only person to make, use or sell a product or an invention. Now, what is patent actually? Whenever a person comes up with some invention or he comes out with a product, okay, a company, maybe he comes up with a product. Now that product is that person's invention. So that person has the whole soul right to sell it. None other than that person or that company can sell it. Now that right is given by the trademark. It is a kind of protection of your product or your invention. That right is given by the trademark, patent and trademark office. And that right usually lasts for about 14 to 20 years. Then if you want to continue, you have to again further apply for the patent right. Okay. Now next word is reflected. Reflected means when you deeply think about something before coming to a conclusion. So now as you read the paragraph, what this paragraph says is, you all know that hard work pays, right? And the same happened with Mary and Pierre. They worked hard and finally their effort of purifying radium proved to be successful. That was actually a great beginning and was going to be very fruitful particularly in the medical industry. Why? Because that was very effective for the patients who were suffering from cancer. And no one knew that how much it is going to be effective and beneficial for the medical science. Now, one fine Sunday morning, Pierre explained Mary that since we've come out with this, now they had to disclose this invention to the world, right? So he said we have two choices. The first choice is either we don't keep any reserve right for us and we don't patent that invention and just disclose the invention as well as the purification of radium to the whole world, or the other option was we could be the proprietors and we could take the patent rights of that particular invention. That would make them very rich because they would be the wholesale proprietors of manufacturing radium for the whole world. Mary listened to Pierre very carefully, and then finally, when she was made aware about all these facts, she went into a deep thought and she started thinking what actually they should decide for. Then she finally felt and she told Pierre that this is against the scientific spirit and we cannot go for that. We cannot be the proprietors of our invention.
If we remain the proprietors, we could have a fine laboratory too. Mary's gaze grew fixed. Physicists always publish their researches completely. If our discovery has a commercial future, that is an accident by which we must not profit. And if radium is going to be of use in treating disease, it is impossible to take advantage of that. Having decided, Pierre and Mary headed for the woods on their beloved bicycles. They had chosen forever between poverty and fortune. In the evening, they came back exhausted, their arms filled with leaves and field flowers.
See further with the explanation of the next paragraph. The first word here is proprietor, that means the owner. The next word is fortune, which means luck. And the next word is exhausted, means tired. Now, as Mary told that we cannot be the proprietors of that, still Pierre tried to convince her, saying that if we become the proprietors of our invention, we can become very rich, as well as we can have a big laboratory for our research work. But Mary did not agree to what he said. She just stared at him, and then she said, physicists, they always publish their whole discoveries. And actually, if this particular element that we have discovered, if this is going to be of a commercial use, that is merely an accident. We cannot try to take advantage of that. And moreover, she tried to convince him by saying that if this particular element is going to treat the patients who are suffering from life-threatening disease like cancer, then I will not be in favor of taking advantage or making profit of that. Let the world be beneficial of this invention. Pierre also agreed with what Mary had decided, and they both were quite relieved because they had actually taken the right decision between poverty and fortune. So just to relax themselves, both of them, they headed toward the forest in their bicycles, which they actually enjoyed doing. And by the time it was evening, they came back exhausted and tired.
On 10 December 1903, the Academy of Science of Stockholm announced that the Nobel Prize in Physics for the current year was awarded half to Henry Becquerel, half to Messier and Madame Curie for their discoveries in radioactivity. Now children, before we proceed further with the reading, let me tell you the meaning of Messier. Now Messier here is actually, it's a title or a form of address used to a Frenchman, just like we say Mr. or Sir, okay, to a male here. It's similarly, this is the way to address a Frenchman. Now Henry Becquerel was also awarded in the same year an award for physics. Let's read further. The Nobel Prize meant 70,000 gold francs. There were loans to be repaid to Pierre's brothers, Mary's sisters, donations to scientific societies, gifts to students, and to a childhood friend of Mary. Mary also installed a modern bathroom in their little house and repapered a shabby room. But it never entered her head to mark the occasion by buying a new hat.
Further with that explanation, the first meaning we came across here is repapered. That means put up a new wallpaper. You know what's a wallpaper, right? Which it gives a designer look to the walls. Basically, people who go for interior decoration for their houses, they decorate just merely they skip the painting, and rather than that they go for designer wallpaper. So that is the meaning of repapered. So whatever she had that wallpaper, she changed and she went on for a new one. The next one is, this word is pronounced as Monsieur. Monsieur is, as I explained you while reading the paragraph, it is basically a title or a way of addressing a French man, just like we speak Mr. or Sir here, right? Next word here is shabby. Shabby means untidy. Now this date, 10th December 1903, was an important date in Mary's life because on this date it was announced that the Nobel Prize for Physics would be awarded half to Henry Becquerel and half to Monsieur and Marie Curie. Now, who is Henry Becquerel? I'll be explaining after the explanation of this paragraph. Children, 70,000, now this Nobel Prize meant 70,000 francs. Now, 70,000 francs is a huge amount for a person who is just having leading a normal and average life, right? Now, they were so honest that they did not think about like we humans and what common people does is you see a huge amount of money and then you start deciding about how you will utilize that money for your own comforts and luxuries. But what they did was they had a lot of liabilities to pay. They had to pay for Pierre's brother, Mary's sister. They had taken loan for the research because they had to arrange some money for the research work, which they never had. Then, other than that, they had to give donations to the scientific institutions. Then, apart from that, they also had to pay the students. They wanted to give gifts to their students, whom they used to teach to supplement their to balance amount, get the supplementary amount for their work, for the research work. So after that, they thought of spending something which was very, very necessary in their house. For example, she installed a modern bathroom in her house. She repapered the wall of one of the rooms which was very, very untidy. It was such a person that thinking about all these things, but she never thought about herself. She never thought of purchasing a new hat for herself, which she was very fond of.
Henry Becquerel, born on 15 December 1852, was a French engineer, physicist, scientist, Nobel laureate, and the first person to discover evidence of radioactivity. For work in this field, he, along with Marie Curie and Pierre Curie, received the 1903 Nobel Prize in Physics. The SI unit for radioactivity, the becquerel, is named after him. Keeping away from the limelight, Mary soon resumed the routine work of school and laboratory. Towards 2:30 on Thursday, 19 April 1906, a sultry, rainy day, Pierre left the university, attempted to cross a road, accidentally stepped into the path of a heavy dray, and lost his life in a flash. After the funeral, the government officially proposed to award Mary a pension. She refused flatly. "I am young enough to earn my living and that of my children," she said, displaying her habitual bravery. The Council of the Faculty of Science unanimously decided to entrust Pierre's post at the Sorbonne to Mary. This was the first time that a position in French higher education had been given to a woman. On the day of her first lecture, the amphitheater was packed and Mary walked in to a storm of applause. She inclined her head and waited for the ovation to stop. Then she stared straight ahead of her and said, "When one considers the progress that has been made in physics in the past 10 years, one is surprised at the advance that has taken place in our ideas concerning electricity and matter." Marie Curie had resumed the course at the precise sentence where Pierre Curie had left it. Tears rose to the eyes and rolled down the faces there.
Now, children, after winning the Nobel Prize, Mary and Pierre, they became quite famous. Now, usually a human tendency is when you become famous, people know you, the world knows you, you feel you have that star kind of a feeling, right? And then you are on top of the world. But that was not the case with Mary and Pierre. She just kept herself away from limelight. She did not bother. There were journalists, there were people who came to interview them, and they wanted to ask every minute detail about their personal life, but they completely refused, saying that that is none of their interest. So they continued with their research work. They kept themselves outside of this limelight, and they continued with their teaching, with their research work, and then everything was going very smooth. But destiny, whatever is written, you cannot change that, right? So something that was destined, what happened was, on 19th April 1906, let me explain the word meanings before proceeding with that. The first word here is sultry, because the content that I'm going to explain is having all these words. So before understanding that, let us understand the meaning of these words. The word sultry means hot and humid. Dray is basically a low, flat, horse-driven vehicle which is drawn by horse, which was used in past to carry heavy loads. The next word is unanimously. Unanimously means by everyone in a particular group. Ovation, you must have seen, there are people who get standing ovation. At times, ovation means basically when a group of people, they appreciate somebody continuously. Usually it is in the way of, by means of applause, means clapping. Everybody stands and gives a standing ovation. So that is the meaning of ovation. So let's continue with the explanation. Now on 19th April 1906, when Pierre, he went out, it was a hot and humid day, that is a sultry day, it was raining also. Now as he was moving towards the university to take up his classes, suddenly he came on the way of a dray. That means this horse-driven vehicle was going, and he fell into the way and he got crushed. He met an accident with that, and finally he lost his life. Now immediately after the funeral, the government, they wanted to support Mary. Now they tried to give pension, they offered pension to Mary, but Mary was a brave girl. She bravely and flatly she refused, saying that I am enough to earn a living for myself and for my children. Such was the personality of that great scientist. Next, what happened is, now as she denied taking the pension, now the Council of Faculty of Science, they decided together, unanimously means they came up together, and they came to conclusion. They took a decision of offering the position of Pierre to Mary. Now Mary happily accepted that offer, and she agreed to take the position of a professor at Sorbonne. Now the day when she was about to join, that whole amphitheater. Now children, amphitheater means what? Amphitheater is basically an area which is, theaters normally are covered areas, right? You have a huge space with chairs, and it has a roof. Amphitheater is also a huge area where the stage and the seating arrangement is in rises one row after the other, and it doesn't have a roof. So that whole amphitheater was packed, completely packed, with the audience and with the people who had come to attend her speech, her talk. Why? First of all, she was a well-known scientist, and this had never happened in the history, particularly in the French higher education. This was the first woman, she was the first woman who was about to work as a professor over there. And as she entered the amphitheater, the whole audience, they gave a great ovation to her. She was definitely feeling proud. She just held her head high, she inclined her head, and she waited for the audience to stop the ovation. Now she waited for the ovation to stop, and as it was a quiet and calm atmosphere there, everybody was seated. She resumed with the same statement where Pierre had stopped his lecture. The statement was, it's given in the book that we read out just now, as one thinks about the advancement that has been taken place in physics, so on and so forth. Then she continued looking straight in front, staring in front of her. And when she started speaking, where Pierre had ended up his lecture, whole of the audience sitting there, they got so emotional, everybody's eyes were filled with tears.
Now, the personal fame of Madame Curie mounted and spread like a bursting rocket, and Sweden awarded her the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the year 1911. No other man or woman to date has ever received the prize for two different subjects. To the end of her life, Marie continued her work with passion and dedication. On Friday, 6 July 1934, the robust heart beat no more. Marie was buried beside Pierre in the cemetery of Sceaux in the presence of her family, friends, co-workers and students who loved her.
As we come to the concluding paragraph of our chapter, let us go with the word meanings. The first word here is robust, which stands for strong and healthy. Next is cemetery. Cemetery basically is a place where the dead people are buried. Now, Marie not only became famous in her own country, in France, but also she now became popular all over the world. People started recognizing her. People started to talk about her contribution made in the medical science and the research work that she was going about. She continued with her research work, and then Sweden, another important day in her life, Sweden awarded a Nobel Prize to her for chemistry in the year 1911. Still, she continued further. Now, she was the only person who had received Nobel Prize for two different subjects. She got a prize for Nobel Prize for physics earlier, and now in 1911 she got a prize. She was awarded a Nobel Prize for chemistry. Even after receiving Nobel Prizes, after becoming so popular, that never hampered, that never was an obstacle in her dedication and passion. She was working with the same dedication and passion as she had begun her journey of this research. Now she continued with the same dedication, with the same passion, and she did not take much care of her health, because without any safety measures she continued with the research work, and those actually elements are quite harmful, which naturally affected her health. And finally, the day in the history that was Friday 6th July 1934, she had her last breath and she left this world with all her contributions for the people to remember that she had helped the medical industry to grow. Her major contribution is still helping the cancer patients to survive. Radiation plays a very important role in treating the cancer patients. You must have heard about the radiation therapy that is undertaken by the medical people, by the doctors, to treat the patients who are suffering from cancer. And 80% of cancer patients, there are chances of those patients to recover and to come out of that dreadful disease. So after her death, she was buried next in the cemetery, next to her husband's cemetery, the same place, just beside him. And she left with a lot of memories in the history for all of us to remember. And as we ended up with today's session, we read the chapter, we understood the chapter paragraph wise. I would like to show you a very short video just to have a recap of what we read in the chapter and about Marie's life journey. So just have a look at that.
Marie Curie's revolutionary research laid the groundwork for our understanding of physics and chemistry, blazing trails in oncology, technology, medicine, and nuclear physics, to name a few. For good or ill, her discoveries in radiation launched a new era, unearthing some of science's greatest secrets. Growing up in Warsaw, in Russian-occupied Poland, the young Marie, originally named Maria Skłodowska, was a brilliant student, but she faced some challenging barriers. As a woman, she was barred from pursuing higher education, so, in an act of defiance, Marie enrolled in the Floating University, a secret institution that provided clandestine education to Polish youth. By saving money and working as a governess and tutor, she eventually was able to move to Paris to study at the reputed Sorbonne. There, Marie earned both a physics and mathematics degree, surviving largely on bread and tea and sometimes fainting from near starvation. In Paris, Marie met the physicist Pierre Curie, who shared his lab and his heart with her. Back in Paris, the lovelorn Pierre was waiting, and the pair quickly married and became a formidable scientific team. Another physicist's work sparked Marie Curie's interest. In 1896, Henri Becquerel discovered that uranium spontaneously emitted a mysterious X-ray-like radiation that could interact with photographic film. Curie soon found that the element thorium emitted similar radiation. Most importantly, the strength of the radiation depended solely on the element's quantity and was not affected by physical or chemical changes. This led her to conclude that radiation was coming from something fundamental within the atoms of each element. Next, by focusing on a super radioactive ore called pitchblende, the Curies realized that uranium alone couldn't be creating all the radiation. So, were there other radioactive elements that might be responsible? In 1898, they reported 2 new elements: polonium, named for Marie's native Poland, and radium, the Latin word for ray. They also coined the term radioactivity along the way. By 1902, the Curies had extracted 1/10 of a gram of pure radium chloride salt from several tons of pitchblende, an incredible feat at the time. Later that year, Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel were nominated for the Nobel Prize in Physics, but Marie was overlooked. Pierre took a stand in support of his wife's well-earned recognition. And so both of the Curies and Becquerel shared the 1903 Nobel Prize. Well respected, the Curies were on a roll. But tragedy struck in 1906 when Pierre was crushed by a horse-drawn cart as he crossed a busy intersection. Marie, devastated, immersed herself in her research and took over Pierre's teaching position at the Sorbonne, becoming the school's first female professor. Her solo work was fruitful. In 1911, she won yet another Nobel, this time in chemistry for her earlier discovery of radium and polonium, and her extraction and analysis of pure radium and its compounds. This made her the first, and to this date only, person to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. Professor Curie put her discoveries to work, changing the landscape of medical research and treatments. She opened mobile radiology units during World War I and investigated radiation's effects on tumors. However, these benefits to humanity may have come at a high personal cost. Curie died in 1934 of a bone marrow disease, which many today think was caused by her radiation exposure.
So we wind up with the chapter. Few things I'll just, there are few points that I think we all should learn from this great scientist. The very first thing is, she was very passionate. Children, if you all follow these things in your life, now these chapters are basically, they make you learn so that you can imbibe all these qualities into your lives. So she has taught us to be very much passionate about whatever goal you decide for yourself. Definitely everyone should have a goal, should have a motive of their life. So whatever motive you have, keep that in your mind and you should always be passionate about that. The way Marie Curie was passionate. She was very passionate despite all the obstacles, all the problems, all the shortfalls. She still proved to be a successful scientist. Isn't it? So I think you all also should follow that trait in your life. The second thing that we learn is naturally she was very hardworking. So much hardworking that she never bothered about her looks, never bothered about, to become famous. She just concentrated and continued with whatever possible efforts that she could do to carry out his research as a successful one. The next thing that we learn is humble and down to earth. Why humble and down to earth? Because even after becoming popular, even after winning 2 Nobel Prizes, she never bothered at all to become a popular personality or to take advantage of that fame that she was earning. She just kept that aside. She kept herself outside of that limelight, and she continued with her own research, because the main target in her mind was that she wanted to come out with such a research, such an invention that would prove helpful to the humanity, to the people in future. And the last, I would say, she was a selfless person. Selfless person, why? Because when you remember, we discussed in the chapter then that when she and Pierre were having a discussion whether they should have a patent of their invention or whether they should publish their research, she decided to publish their research. Why? She could have thought about herself, she could have become very rich, but she did not think about herself. And she felt that when we come out for an invention, if it is, we cannot take earn profit of that invention, and particularly if that is going to treat a disease. So basically, I feel all these qualities make Marie Curie a unique personality from whom we all should learn, and let us all imbibe those qualities into our lives. With this, I conclude today's session. I'll be giving certain questions as a PDF file that will be attached with this video that I'll be sharing. Please click on the link that is given in the description column just below the video. Click on that. Note down all those questions, plus there will be some reference to context also. Please make a note of all those reference to context. Few questions I'll be giving to you people to write in your own words. Okay, so till then, till we meet again in the next class, goodbye and take care.